Thank you, everybody, for joining today's webinar. Today, we're talking with Mark Tucker from Telstra, and he introduced some topics when we were talking to them about a case study a few months ago around what Telstra was doing around automation in their data centers. And we thought that this was a fairly interesting thing that should be shared with a broader group of people. So Mark has agreed to come on board and tell us a little bit about what's going on at Telstra. Just before we get into the questions with Mark, again, my name is Mike Schmidt. I head up product marketing at Enlight Software, the DSIM software company. And Mark, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, Mark. My name is Mark Tucker. I'm the innovation lead for data centers at Telstra. I've been in the data center industry for about 20 years. Doing a variety of roles in the UK and in Australia. But currently just working in innovation, looking at ways to optimize efficiency within Telstra and assist all of our internal teams and our external clients to have a better experience and to run as efficiently as possible.
Excellent, thanks. So let's talk about what your environment is. I'm not sure your environment is typical to a lot of enterprise businesses. It may be familiar to some other carrier class companies, but there may be companies around the world that have some similarities to the diversity and the expansion of your environment and the various sizes of your data centers. So why don't you describe a little bit about your environment and what's unique about it for you?
Yeah, so Telstra is, I suppose, sort of have to look at where Telstra's come from. So we were part of the old Postmaster General's office, I believe it was called, and that started in the 1900s, or 1900s, so at the turn of the century, the last century. And then Telstra came into its first iteration in about 1970. So that just gives you, an overview of how long we've been around. And I don't think I'd be too far stretched in saying that we still have some equipment from the 1970s on the floors. So that can cause some issues for sure. That's, it's the longevity of the company is one of the things that makes it so unique. And with that longevity, you have a lot of legacy equipment. And that legacy equipment's important for different teams. Telstra's quite a big beast. There's, I think, 30,000 employees, and they all have their own needs from the IT stack and the data center. So you've got that internal, sort of all that internal equipment that you've got to support, that your environment's got to support, that's very old. And then you've got, we have Amazon and VMware deployments and Cisco deployments for their cloud offerings hosted in our data centers as well. So you've got the very new and the very old all in the same place sometimes. And then you've got, we've got co-location offerings. And we're a telco as well. So we're not just a data center provider, we're an enterprise level data center, we're a co-location data center, and we're trying to support our business, our employees and all the different business groups and what they need to do.
And talk a little bit about the uniqueness of your geographic challenges.
Just for a size comparison, Australia, Texas fits 11 times into Australia. So 11 times bigger than Texas. And that presents a whole host of challenges. So with latency and site support, we've got, I think, at last count, there's 55,000 different sites that we manage.
Wow.
At some level within Australia. And those sites can be anything from a small telephone box size deployment right up to a huge, 20, 30, 40, 50 megawatt data center. And there's everything in between. We've got floors in buildings. We've got buildings that are mixed use. So we've got data center floors and exchange floors, so telephone exchange floors, all in the same building. Depending what those what the intent is for the equipment in those buildings, they have various levels of redundancy and resiliency built into them. I think Telstra has approximately 4 or 5 helicopters for use for their techs in the really remote environments, so that they can provide support to, remote places within Australia, such as the Tiwi Islands, which is in the north of Australia. And a lot of the places we can't get skilled technicians, so we rely on local electricians or contracting staff to go and do equipment installs and fault finding and that sort of stuff. So you sometimes you're relying on less skilled labour to help at your facilities. And then, we rent co-location space as well. If we didn't have enough space of our own, we're renting some off other people as well.
Right. So talk about some of your, I'll call them historical nightmares, but I mean, they may still be present. What are some of the challenges, both managing from a geographic standpoint, as well as you talked about, managing the diverse customers that you serve, from colo to third parties like Amazon and Cisco Cloud? What are some of the real challenges that you as the innovation manager are looking to solve, right, and overcome, so they aren't problems and keep you up at night?
Wow, yeah, there's a few for sure.
Well, give us a handful. Scare some people out there. Tell us what you're working for.
I think one of the biggest challenges in our environment is just the speed of growth that we've seen probably in the last 20 years. So prior to that, sort of, if you pulled 300 watts a cabinet or a kilowatt a cabinet was a really high density deployment. So you build a facility, when you build new facilities or you refresh existing facilities 10 or 15 years ago, or 15 or 20 years ago, sorry, you probably, if you built for 2.5 kilowatts per cabinet, that was a really high powered floor.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of 5 years later, you're building them, that's not going to do the job for you. So we've got all these different levels of facilities throughout the organization. We've got sites, floors that are designed for 3 kilowatts, right out to our latest facilities, which will support 35 kilowatts a cabinet, and are designed for to support water cooling to the chip if required. So you've got everything in between, and then as well as that density limitations or that design limitations that the floors or the areas are built for, you have different types of redundancy and power feeds, and it's all around how it was designed at the time, which was probably best practice at the time, but isn't suitable going forward. And then that sort of leads to stranded capacity in a lot of places, and then you've got capital expense to upgrade those lower capacity floors or environments, and you've got legacy equipment in all of those areas, and a lot of that legacy equipment is running inefficiently, but you can't get rid of it because it supports a customer or supports a function within the business. So
right.
you want to the older style floors are less efficient, and you want to bring up their efficiency and bring up their density so you can utilize that space better. But you've got to have control of your environment to do that. And that's one of the great things that we've used Nlight for, is to help us gain control of those environments and understand where our stranded space is and understand where our stranded capacity is, and use it to model how we can help those environments to run better or run more efficiently, or adjust things so that there's a better result for the company.
Great. You may be answering somewhat part of this. You may have just answered somewhat part of this question I'm going to ask, talking about stranded, power and capacity. But when you introduced your DSIM solution, what were some of the first benefits that you gained from it? And I'm going to ask the second part of that, because what were the things you weren't expecting that you gained from it? But let's talk about what were the first things you really benefited from. And you had mentioned being able to identify stranded and capture that stranded power and capacity. What was that it, or was there more stuff that you got off the top of the barrel here?
Yes. So the stranded capacity was probably a really big win for us in the data centers when we rolled Nlight out, because so our cost model was that we would, as a data center team or business unit, we would pay for the environments to be built and then charge back to the rest of Telstra to utilize that, to utilize the RU space. So when we bought Nlight in, we immediately identified all this usable space that we could sell back to help us, break even as a business unit. So that was that immediate financial benefit that we sort of knew that was out there, but we couldn't quantify it. And so now we could quantify it quite easily. Also, the CFD modeling, or the temperature and humidity modeling that you get out of Nlight, has helped us to identify and be proactive in a number of cases within some of our more high density environments to stop faults before they become a problem, and prevent outages. So we weren't sure how that was going to work, which it's been really good. And so you've got that stranded capacity, stranded space, and it's actually helped us run most of our environments more efficiently as well, just by having that really granular level of monitoring, alerting and alarming, and reporting. So I think we've been able to increase our supply air temperature just because we have that monitoring and reporting available in a lot of environments, which helps obviously with efficiency. And we've also been able to get more accurate details around the IT equipment and its power draw. So for example, when prior to Nlight, most of our planning was done based on 60% of nameplate capacity for any IT equipment as a planning value. And by using Nlight's reporting and monitoring, we've actually worked out that most of our IT equipment only runs at about 40% of nameplate value.
Wow.
So that's allowed us to increase the density of the equipment without actually increasing how much power we use in any given environment. So it's quite a big change.
So like I said, the second part of that question, and you can go one or two ways with that. Did the DSIM solution show you something that surprised you that you didn't know that you were able to act on, or was it able to do something that you weren't expecting it to do?
That's kind of a difficult one to answer because we'd all seen, sat through the sales presentations and had a pretty good inkling of what the capability was, but just seeing it live in your own environment is the really surprising thing, and just seeing how detailed it is and how easy it is to use are probably the main things that sort of jumped out at us straight away. Sort of, it just gave us so much detail on all of our environments where it had been deployed, and that sort of made it easier for us to talk to other parts of the business and get them using it as well, because of this, the ease of use and what it can do at all levels. And it's not just applicable for it's not just applicable for us as a data center team. We've been able to apply it to the exchange planning teams, facility planning teams, and I think at the moment, even some office planning teams are looking at using it going forward within Telstra. So that's doing rack and stack for people within their office environments. So yeah, its use cases are really broad, which is great.
Great. So it sounds like the product marketing manager did a really good job at setting expectations up front.
Yeah, I think we dragged Julie through the mud for about 5 years before we bought it. So
definitely.
We had a pretty good look.
Definitely. But yeah, it's an interesting point about, it actually expanding beyond the data center, and other teams within the organization see value and benefit to them. And I think that we hear that a lot from customers, that the ability to interact with other systems and other teams to provide benefits is a key advantage of it, and it makes it a bit more of a strategic tool than just a typical, power and space management tool.
Yeah, I think from memory, there was 8 legacy applications that we were able to decommission once Nlight was deployed. So that's 8 applications within Telstra that performed various functions that we didn't need anymore, and we didn't need to pay support on. We didn't need to have employees running them. Which is a cost saving, and it simplifies what we're trying to do as well.
That's great. Okay, so let's kind of shift gears a little bit. We've talked about your environment and everything, but kind of the whole crux of having this conversation was talk about what you're doing around automation. You've introduced a lot of different pieces around it. Why don't you talk about the journey of automation that you started with, and we'll talk a little bit about where you're going as well. I think there's some really cool things. Let's save as teasers after this, but talk about your journey up to this point.
So within sort of the data center, anywhere you can put in automation is great. So your lighting controls, your cooling, doors, whatever it is, alerting and alarming, all that good stuff. Any automation you can put into that, it's going to save you money. It's going to help your facility run more efficiently. But a lot of the times, all of those things are separate. So your cooling automation is run off one platform. Your BMS is run off another platform, and all the way down the line. As we've rolled out those different automation IT stacks within the different environments, it becomes very difficult to manage. And one of the great things about Nlight is the integration that you can put in with that automation. So when something changes in your environment, if we talk about cooling, for example, when you've got variable speed fans within your crack units or your cooling units, and you have, a third-party system to control those fans depending on air temperature, you can integrate Nlight into that stack, or you can use Nlight to pick up the details around what that stack's doing, that cooling stack and the IT stack that controls it, and then plug that into Nlight, integrate it, and you can understand the automation that's happening and see how it's working. So which has been really good.
Great. All right. So you were earlier talking about, you've got 55,000 locations, you've got 4 helicopters, and there's a lot of places where you just don't have trained, or properly trained, craftsmen to go out and do things in your working things. You're looking at augmented reality to help with this. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Telstra's been on a little bit of a journey with augmented reality that started with their customers. You can have an AR or VR store, a retail store, and we sort of had a look at that, what they were doing, and thought, gee, there's some definitely some functionality that we could use in data centers. For the remote locations, or even any sort of location really. So we talked to Nlight and we saw the videos and the presentations, and we were just incredibly blown away by the capability. So we're looking to get that up and running in our environment, and hopefully we'll be running a few test cases or pilot programs in the next 12 months or so, and that's going to give us the ability, if you've got there's different use cases, but if you've got a site that doesn't have a 24/7 security presence, and someone goes to site, how do they know where to go if they're not escorted?
Right.
So with the AR capability, they can have an overlay on the floor to walk them through where they need to go. The rack elevations in the AR is just incredible from an audit perspective. You can go straight to the rack with your Google Glass or your mobile phone and have an overlay of what Nlight thinks should be in the rack versus what's actually in the rack or cabinet. And then right down to, if you've got an unskilled technician, you can have videos or walkthroughs with an AR overlay that tell them exactly how to do something. And that's, that can be from how to open the cabinet to how to replace modules within a server. All that AR capabilities there.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people excited to see how AR can help them in environments like yours, as well as just standard data center environments. Also, I think somewhere along the line, we discussed something about you introducing robotics into the management of your data center. I mean, robotics means a lot of things. I mean, we've had robotic, disk systems and things like that for storage. What is it Telstra is looking at around robotics?
Yeah, so we're very much in the infancy on that journey, but we have some clear ideas about how we believe robotics can help, and they tie in with the AR capability very much, and they can, the AR and the robotics piece are very similar, but our intent for the robotics at this stage is to have a security presence with automated robots that move around the facility to provide security, from cameras, recording capability, and then access to the facility you'd be done via the robot. So I suppose the best way to describe it is you would go to the facility, any facility, you'd be greeted by the robot as opposed to a traditional security guard. That robot would ask you some questions. You'd have to provide your access ticket numbers, and then the robot would cross-reference those details with the internal systems, make sure the ticket's right and it's, all your ID checks out and all the rest of it. That robot at that level could also provide a real person to talk to, so you could use the robot to talk to a help desk operator, for instance. And then the robot will escort you through the facility to where you need to go and stay with you, so it provides the escort function. And the robot, our view is the robot would be the only one that had access to the facility. So doors won't open without the robot. That's cabinet doors, that's room doors, that's site doors. So the robot provides all that functionality. It provides a recording functionality. So while you're doing your work, it'll record what's going on to make sure you're doing it properly. So that helps us with standards and compliance. You've got that one-to-one functionality. So if you need help with something, you can use a robot to assist. So that's around the escort and security function. And while the robots aren't doing that, there'd be the expectation that they have the ability to basically walk the floors and check the environments. So report on environmental conditions, audit cabinets and equipment. So they're scanning all the time, scanning the equipment, cross-referencing that with the Nlight database to make sure that everything's where it should be and compliant. Send alerts and alarms, or integrate with Nlight to send alerts and alarms if there's a change in environmental conditions. And then also have the ability for an operator to see an alert or an alarm and send the robot to that location where the alert or alarms occurred, and see what's going, have a visual view, just so view what's going on via the robot without actually having anyone on site. So there's a lot to take in there.
Yeah, I think that's great. And they're not going to complain about having to work in the hot or cold aisle, or having to wear earplugs, because of the noise.
Yeah.
So
well,
that's great.
And I think that, so that's I mean, there's probably 20 different versions in there, but that's our intent with this robotics piece. And then eventually, I think you need to look at a data center where there's no humans or no people on the floor at any stage, and the robots will do the majority of the work within the environment. So they'll install the servers, decommission the servers, and do that functionality for you. And I mean, that's quite a long way off, but we've already seen in warehouses, shipping, like container depots and stuff, where the robots are replacing people in a lot of those lift, carry, install functions. So that's probably version 2 or 3 down the line, but that's ideally what we get to.
Just an editorial here. I think the equipment manufacturers may have to take a look at the plug side of equipment, so a robot doesn't have to deal with cabling and things. But I think that's a real interesting and exciting direction we're going.
So you're going to move to a sort of a backplane style environment,
right?
Where everything sort of connects to that backplane, but that also will give you advantages, as in, you could probably create that backplane to be water cooled to the chip, which gives you increases your density. There's all sorts of stuff that goes into it, but I mean, imagine if you think about a data center where you never have to turn the lights on, there's probably like a 5% saving every year.
That's pretty exciting. That's exactly. Yeah. Well, Mark, this has been really exciting conversation. I appreciate your time. I'd like to tell people that if they want to learn more about the subjects here, they can go to nlight.com and go to our resource center. You can find information out about our DSIM, automation, augmented reality. You can see the case study from Telstra and what they're doing as an overall DSIM solution. And if you have any questions or would like to see the product in action, you can either contact again nlight.com or info@nlight.com, and we're happy to get in touch with you and answer any questions. Again, Mark, thank you very much. This has been really informative, and I wish you good luck in your endeavors.
Thanks very much, Mike. It was really lovely to talk to you. Thanks,
Thank you.
Nlight.
Cheers. Bye-bye.